welcome back to another devotion, Turning Points with God by David Jeremiah. Today's title is What Makes You Happy? Question mark, that's a question. It's found on page 150. Our scripture comes from 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 6, and I will be reading that from my King James Bible. And it says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain." Internet matchmaking sites differ in purpose. Some are dating sites that allow singles to meet and get together. Other sites are marriage-oriented, requiring interested parties to fill out extensive questionnaires about themselves and the kind of person they're looking for. All of these sites are based on a single premise. Few people are happy being single. God himself said to Adam, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him." That's a scripture from Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. God said that ideally, men and women should meet, marry, and populate the earth. What he didn't say was that it's okay to be unhappy until that meeting and marrying takes place. The Apostle Paul pointed out that singleness can be a rare blessing, the chance to be wholly committed to serving Christ. His point is this: whether you are single or married, use the conditions as an opportunity to serve the Lord with all your heart. Are you happy where you are, taking advantage of the opportunity you have today? Happiness is not a state of companionship. Rather, true joy is a byproduct of being in the center of the will of God. There is never a place in the Bible where it says that marriage makes you happy. It says over and over again that God makes you happy. That is a quote by PURNELL. Wow, this is so true. Marriage does not make you happy, but that does not mean that marriage has to make you miserable either. I've shared before that James and I divorced, and it was during that time that we were apart that God really began to work on me and to change me, to kind of get me getting me back in line where he originally at the beginning had always intended me to be, and that is to serve him. And I make no secrets or excuses. I mean, there was a time that James was my God. You know what I'm saying? I didn't have time for anything or anyone but him. My whole focus was him, making him happy, doing for him. You know, he was my world. He was my everything. That's not to say he's not now, that I don't love him and that he don't mean everything to me and all of that. I'm not saying that. The reference I'm trying to make is I had no time for God because I made James my God. James didn't do that. I did that. And God tried to, correct me, but ultimately, I'm hard-headed. I've told y'all before, I have to go around the world to learn a lesson. I wish I could be the type of person that you could just say, and then okay. And, but no, I'm hard-headed. I have to do things the hard way a lot of times. I hope I'm getting better in that department, but that's beside the point. But God had to take me out of that, and he had to get me alone. And when I tell you I was alone, I was alone. At that time, I had moved to Ocean Springs. I knew no one down here. No one. My family was 45 minutes away in any direction. My daughter was not living with me. She was actually living with my ex-husband. I didn't have James. Cody was busy with Sarah doing their thing, living their life, working, going about their, all I literally had was my job, that I was there for 8 hours, and then I would come home, and I was alone. I had no friends outside of work. I mean, I had friends at work, but we didn't do anything outside of work. I had no friends. my kids were all grown. Delana was working, going to school. Cody's married. My mom was doing her own thing. You know, they live so far away. Well, so far, I mean like 45 minutes. But I was literally, honestly, isolated here. I knew no one. I didn't even know my neighbors. I did know the lawn guy because I had met him when I moved into this house. But that was it. And I mean, we didn't have a friendship. You know, he cut my grass. But looking back, I understand why that had to happen. Because God had to get me alone so I could listen to him. So he could get my attention. And that's when I really began, you know, getting into my word. I had went up to my mama's on a weekend to spend the night, and we had all gathered around and was watching the movie War Room. And that's when God used that movie to speak to me, and that's when my closet became my war room. And I would get up early before it was time for me to get ready for work to get into my war room. And I was just in a state, in a place where I was utterly alone. And all I had was God. But that was all I needed. And he began to do a work in me. And so I understand where it says, but godliness with contentment is great gain. Because I had to learn to be content. And I got there. And then, he began to restore things back into my life. James and I got back together. We rekindled. We got remarried. It was better than it was the first time. Delana moved back home. I started making friends. He put me in a different job where I had friends locally. I started making friends, started hanging out with friends, doing things. And God began to slowly restore to me what had to be taken away from me. But when he did that, because I had already been in that place with him, and I was kind of I was in a better place with God, more aware of God, in my relationship with God, then everything that he restored back to me had their proper place. But he was, is, and always will be priority. I love being married, and that's another thing God had to teach me. It wasn't until I was married to James, or we were apart, and then all that God really began to deal with me about my place as a wife, the role as a wife. Being a wife is a very powerful, important role. But as with everything in God's kingdom, there's order. And he began to talk to me and teach me the order and my place in the home, my place as a wife. And I know to some people, especially this modern age, I'm an independent woman. I can do anything a man can do. No, you can't. No, you can't. And that does not make you weak, because there's a lot of things you can do that men can't do. But we'll save that for another day. But God began to show me my place and my role as a wife so that I could be a good wife. Because I would pray, I want to be a good wife. I want to be a godly wife. I want to be the kind of wife God created me to be. And when you have order in your home and the way God has lined it up and intended it, there's harmony. There's happiness. Now, that does not mean James and I don't get in spats here and there and, have disagreements here and there. No, that's just life. That's people cohabitating together. You're not going to agree on every single thing because you're different individuals. But we have so much joy and laughter and fun. We're each other's best friends. Something happens to him, I'm the first one he wants to talk to. Something happens to me, he's the first one I want to talk to. We share things, and we're just happy. We're happy. But that come at a price that I had to pay. Because, he paid in his own way. I'm not going to tell his testimony, but it came at a price that I had to pay to get to that contentment in God, so God could then restore to me things. And in the restoration process, he restored James and I in our marriage, and you know, here we are, as Paul Harvey would say, and that's the rest of the story. I mean, we're just living for God is the best thing we can ever do for ourselves. Trusting him even in the painful processes. At the time that I was going through all that, I didn't understand why. I didn't. And I would cry out, and I was like, why are you allowing me to hurt so much? Why? This is not where I want to be. This is not how it's supposed to be, you know. And I'm sure, being a parent, I can understand kind of a little bit in his ways, where he was saying, it hurts me more than it hurts you, but if you'll trust me, it's going to work out. And ultimately, that's what I had to do. I just had to just trust him. Even when I didn't understand it, even when I was crying and hurting and in pain and lonely, I would just have to trust him. And there was a lot of lonely times, a lot of lonely days and nights, a lot of lonely weekends. That if you was to have looked back, you'd be like, oh my Lord, like, how did you get through that, God? God got me through it. I didn't have the fun stories and times. I mean, and it went on for a while. It was not an overnight thing, y'all. This went on for a long time. It went on for a very long time. But like the saying says, how does it go? Let me think. How does it go? I remember the days that I have now, the things I prayed for, or something that I can't remember how it goes. I'll try to put it on the screen. But I'm living in the middle of answered prayers today that I prayed years ago. I'm living in the middle of answered prayers. I remember the days that I prayed for the things that I have now. Maybe that's how it goes. I remember the days. I remember that. And I don't want to, for a second, to take any of it for granted. And I've even told James, even when he gets on my last nerve and I'm so aggravated at him, I might even be mad at him, I still want to be with him. He's still my favorite person. That's God. That's contentment in God. And when you're content, that is priceless. If you have true contentment, which can only come from God, okay? True contentment can only come from God. And when you have that, you have something that money can't buy. And you have something that people are, even the richest people in the world, are searching for and think they can afford. And it's free. God freely gives it. We just have to do our part. He's so good. But contentment in God is priceless. It is a priceless treasure that no man can afford with money. You can't buy it. You can't barter for it. It can only come from God. True contentment can only come from God. And in some cases, such as mine, true contentment comes at a price. Are you willing to pay it? And it's not something that is easy. But when you get it, it's worth it. It's so worth it. It's like when you're out thrifting and you find that peace that you've been looking for, that excitement, that joy. It's better than that. It's better than that. The joy and contentment from God is like no other. There's really no words that I can even describe it. But I hope you feel it, and I hope you have it. And I hope you don't have to go around the world the hard way to get it like I did. I pray you have an amazing day. I love each and every one of you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, y'all.